Sting me.
Whoever said you can't play video games and board games at the same time? I'm not sure who said that, actually, but I think they're wrong because today we're going to be setting up a game that lets you do just that. Today we're going to be setting up Boss Monster. And Boss Monster is a card game that's heavily inspired by 8-bit side-scrolling dungeon video games. You can see by the outside of the box, it looks just like an old Nintendo package that you would have got when you picked up maybe Zelda for the first time. The cards inside, all very 8-bit, very neat 8-bit retro-inspired theme. If you like video games, you like retro video games, and you like tabletop card games, this game might be for you because it blends all those three things together into a card game. We're going to go through the setup and component overview of Boss Monster, so let's set up Boss Monster. Boss Monster is a 2 to 4 player game that plays in about 30 minutes. So it's a pretty fast game to play, and it's a super fast game to set up. Boss Monster takes you back to those 8-bit video game days that you used to play the hero, running through the side-scrolling dungeons, trying to beat the bosses and rescue the princess. Boss Monster turns that around a little bit, and you actually play the boss, and you're going to be building dungeons. So this is a dungeon card game. You're going to be building rooms in your dungeon to stop heroes from making it through to get to you. As that boss, as you build rooms, you're going to be wanting to make those rooms difficult so that the heroes die before they reach you, but you also want to be attracting the most heroes towards you because you want to reach the most points to win the game. To win the game, you're going to need to gather 10 souls, and the first player that gets 10 souls, that's your winner. Or if you're the last player standing, because if heroes can make it through your dungeon and make it all the way to the boss, they inflict wounds on those bosses. And bosses that receive 5 wounds, those bosses actually will die from the game. So either you're the last boss standing or the first boss to obtain 10 souls. And you'll gain souls by killing off heroes. In Boss Monster, you have 5 decks of cards. And we're going to go through each of those decks of cards first before we set anything up, just to give you a good idea and a good explanation of what each card does, so that way you can better understand how the cards kind of play out in the setup. We'll start with the boss cards. The boss cards are exactly what they sound like. This is who you play in the game. These are the bosses. These are the monsters that the players at the table are going to be playing. And each player is going to be playing a boss, and each player is going to be building a dungeon. And heroes are going to be running through those players' dungeons, trying to get through the dungeon to defeat the bosses. But you're going to be trying to stop that by building your dungeon the most difficult way you can, so that you can be collecting those hero souls. So the boss cards, we'll just flip over this top one. Each player would take a random boss monster, and that's your identity in the game. You would then set those cards to the side because you're not going to be needing those cards for the remainder of the game. So for this, I drew the Cerebellus card, and this boss, you know it's a boss monster, but because the top left gold icon represents boss card. Then you have the title of the card, or the name of the boss, Cerebellus, Father Brain. And he kind of has like an old Metroid style look to him a little bit, or maybe a old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles kind of look. And then underneath him, you have this level up text, and the level up text is when the boss levels up. And you level up your boss once your dungeon has reached its 5th room. Once you've built that 5th room, then you activate your level up ability. The bottom left hand corner of the card shows the experience, and that's just simply a ranking number just to tell you what the play order for all the players are. You always start with the highest XP player down to the lowest. It really has no effect in the game other than it just shows you turn order. In the bottom right hand corner of the card, we have the treasure symbol, and the Cerebellus, he attracts the mage style fighters, so he gives you a treasure icon for the mage. And each boss has a little different icon. As you'll see, the rooms also have different icons. We'll set that to the side for now, but each player would start with one boss card because that's who they are. That's the boss that they're going to be in the game. Now let's move over to the room deck. The room deck, this is the actual cards that you're going to be using to build your dungeon with. Each of these cards is a different type of room, and there's 2 different types of rooms. You have normal rooms and you have advanced rooms. And advanced rooms are signified by the gold icon in the top left. And normal rooms have a silver icon in the top left. And then there's two subcategories of rooms. You have trap rooms and you have monster rooms. And again, the icons for the monster rooms show like a little monster head, and the trap rooms show a little skull and crossbones. And we'll go through each of these types of cards. The normal rooms and the advanced rooms basically are the same in terms of the anatomy of the card. They might just have different spell effects or different abilities within the game. Again, the top left shows you the type of room, whether it's normal or advanced, and whether or not it's a monster or trap room. Then you have the name of the room itself in the top portion of the card. Then you have a pictorial representation of what the room looks like. And you can tell it's got a nice 8-bit style to it. Carries that theme through very well. And then we have the room ability text down here below the picture. And that just tells you what the room might be doing. It might be different actions like once per turn, once you build the room. Different things have different effects, and they might affect other players. They might affect rooms to the left and right of each room. But there's enough variety in the cards that it keeps the game interesting and lets you have enough strategy to try to build the dungeons to your liking. The bottom left icon shows the damage that the room will inflict to heroes as they enter in. So for the Succubus Spa, every time a hero enters this room, they're automatically going to take 1 point of damage. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, we have the treasure icon. And the treasure icon, just again, like the boss card itself, that shows you what type of hero is going to be attracted to this room. So the more of that icon that you have throughout your dungeon, that's going to attract that much more. It's going to attract those types of heroes. So for the Succubus Spa, it has the cleric icon, so it's going to be attracting cleric heroes. And the idea in the game is to try to build your dungeon in such a way that you're going to be attracting, you want to have the most of those cleric icons than other players at the table. That means you're going to be attracting those cleric fighters or cleric heroes into your dungeon. But you don't want to just have it lopsided and only have cleric symbols. You want to try to get enough variety where you're pulling in multiple heroes to your dungeon, because the more heroes you can defeat, that's the more souls you're going to be acquiring, which means you're going to be that closer, much closer to winning the game. That kind of goes through the room cards, and then we'll kind of explain those a little bit more as we set it up to show you how they kind of play out in terms of the build order. But next we're going to jump over to the hero cards, and there's two different types of hero cards. We have normal heroes, and then we have epic heroes. And the only real difference between normal and epic is that the epic heroes obviously have a little bit more health because they're epic. So they're stronger. They have more health and are a little bit more difficult to beat or to defeat. They also, the other main difference is if you defeat a normal hero, it's only worth 1 soul, whereas an epic hero is worth 2 souls. And then also, the same applies to the negative effect, that is, if a normal hero makes it through your dungeon all the way to the boss, that is going to take off 1 wound for each boss, whereas an epic hero will take off 2 wounds. So epic heroes, a little bit stronger in terms of value and a little bit stronger in terms of damage. The anatomy of those cards is very similar to the boss cards, very similar to the room cards. You have the type of hero, the name of the hero up here in the top. The top right shows the icon. This treasure icon, this shows you what type of treasure that hero is actually going to be attracted to. So for this mage, they're attracted to the little book icon, which means dungeons that have a high quantity of these mage icons, that's where this hero is going to travel to. It's going to travel to that dungeon. Whereas the thief, it's going to be attracted to dungeons that have a high number of these little money bag icons. The bottom left shows you the health of the hero, and that's little heart. Very, very normal for those types of old games. The old red heart, it was always the health heart. So for normal hero here, we have a 6, and for the thief, epic hero, we have 11. You can see the difference in terms of strength or health. And then down here in the middle, we have a little looks like a little 2-player and 3-player icon. That just simply shows you which cards you're going to be using in 2 and 3 and 4-player games. Some of these cards you'll be excluding for 2-player games and then 3-player games, but 4-player games, you're going to use all the cards. This is just showing you you don't want to include the other cards. So if you're playing a 3-player game, any hero that had the 4-player symbol, you would just exclude that. So you're going to shrink the number of cards in each of the hero decks. And then over here on the bottom right, you see the little blood driplet icon, and that again just shows you the wound that these players or these heroes inflict on bosses if they make it all the way through the dungeon. And that shows you, kind of gives you a good idea of the hero cards, and we'll show you how those set up here in a second. But the last deck of cards we have is the spell deck. And the spell deck are simply cards that are going to amplify some of the effects that you have within your dungeon. And you can play these cards during different phases in the game, and those phases are indicated on the card itself. You have at the tops of the cards, you just have the name of the spell, and then down here in the flavor text, it shows you what that spell is going to affect, what its ability is, and then in the bottom left, you have the type of phase that this spell can be played in, and there's three different types. You have a hammer icon, which can be played during the build phase, an axe icon, which can be played during the adventure phase, and then you have cards or spells that can be played in either or phase. So those are really just there to kind of help. They can do things across the tables. You can affect other players that might be strengthening your own dungeon. They all have different effects. But that explains the spell deck, and that's the last deck of cards that you have with Boss Monster. I think we should go into, since we mentioned the phases there, let's talk about the different phases of the game. Each round of play has what I break down into 5 different phases. You have beginning of turn, you have the build phase, you have the bait phase, the adventure phase, and then you have your end of turn phase. And they all five of those move pretty quickly, and we'll kind of go through those a little bit as we set this up here. The beginning of the turn is just that. That's where you're going to be revealing heroes and drawing cards. Then you're going to have the build phase, and that's when you're actually going to be building rooms in your dungeon. You're going to start that off with the highest experienced player. That's the boss card that has the most experience. That player will build a room first. Then you'll go around the table from increased to decreasing experience number, and everybody will be building a room. Then you're going to have the bait phase, and the bait phase means now you're going to be looking at the heroes that have been revealed in town, and then they're going to be traveling to the dungeons that match the symbols that they have on their cards to the dungeon that has the most of those symbols. So again, for the thief, if the thief has the money bag icon, it's going to go to the player that has the most money bag symbols. So that's where you want to try to build that diversity in your dungeon to attract those heroes. Then you're going to have the adventure phase. And the adventure phase is when the heroes are actually going to be traveling through each player's dungeons. And again, you start with the highest experienced player or boss at the table, and then you're going to be running those heroes through the dungeons, either killing them off or they're inflicting damage to you, to determine what your score is going to be during the end of turn phase, which is the last phase of the round. And that's when you're going to be looking to see how many souls you've collected, how many wounds you've collected, and then also if you've had any rooms that were deactivated, you would then reactivate those rooms for the start of the next round. So let's go ahead and set up the game. Enough yapping about cards. Let's set the game up here. It's real simple. There's not a lot to it. I've pretty much gone through the entire overview and components, but I just want to show you how the game sets up so that you can get started pretty quickly. So you have your boss card. You set it out in front of you. Each player has that in front of you. Each player is then going to draw 5 room cards off the deck and then 2 spell cards. And then each player is going to look at those cards and decide which 2 they want to discard. You're going to keep the other 5 but discard 2. So you would discard 2 into the primary discard pile. You have 1 discard pile that is shared by both the spell and room because you'll use this as a draw deck later on, potentially with some abilities and cards. Once every player has done that, each player then has the ability to build 1 room. So you would lay a room down to the left of your boss. Once all players have done that, that starts the game. Now you're going to have the beginning of the turn, or the beginning turn phase of the round 1. And you're going to do that by revealing 2 hero cards in town. So you reveal the first 2 heroes, normal heroes. You go through all the normal heroes first, and then you move to the epic heroes. So you revealed 2 heroes in town. Now each player will then draw an additional room card. And then play would begin by having the build phase of the boss that has the highest XP. And then that's when you would build a room. Then you would go into the bait phase, see which heroes go where, do the adventure phase, and then your end of turn phase, and then you would repeat and recycle and do the same thing. One thing I'll mention here real quick as we wrap this video up is that once your room, again, hits 5 rooms, you're going to be activating that level up power on your boss, and that might be something you want to time, it might not, it's up to you. But then also, once you've reached the maximum of 5 rooms, you also will still be drawing cards. You'll still be drawing room cards, and you can actually build rooms on top of rooms to try to change up the dynamics of your dungeon. So if you have a room that you feel like just isn't powerful enough, you can take any normal room and build that right on top of another room. So when it's the build phase, you can build a room right on top of a room, which then is going to change up the strength or the dynamics of your dungeon as heroes are running through. The only difference is if you have an advanced room, you can only build those on top of cards that have the same matching symbols. So for instance, the recycling center has a little thief icon down here in the bottom right. You can only build advanced rooms on top of other rooms that have that same money bag or thief treasure icon. They cannot be built on just any room like your normal rooms can be. And that kind of wraps up the setup and overview of Boss Monster. Not a lot to it, just a lot of symbols, lots of little text, but once you get going, once you get through round 1 and 2, it's pretty easy to keep going. There's a few rules on cards that may not make a lot of sense, and you may have to run to Google to find out what everybody else is doing in that case, if you care, or you just make up your own house rule. But the game itself plays pretty fast. It's pretty neat having heroes running through your dungeon, trying to, kill them off before they can get to you and try to kill you off. Each player is doing the same thing at the table. You have some cross-play action, so you're trying to prevent other players' dungeons from having any strength. So there's lots of little things you can do here. It's a nice throwback to the 8-bit side-scroll dungeon video games. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let us know if you did by giving us a thumbs up. Let us know if you have any comments in the comment box below. Subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys later.